right. Well, welcome everybody. I have a half an hour and I have a lot of slides, so I'm gonna move pretty quickly, but this is a small audience, so we can have a bespoke experience. Feel free to make me stop or ask a question at any point as we go along. So I'm gonna very briefly introduce Farm Credit East to you, explain kind of who we are and what we do. We're going to talk about marketing. When people teach marketing, they usually cover what they call the 5 Ps, which are product, price, place, promotion, and people. And then I'll probably have to skip the case study, but we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So Farm Credit East is our service area. We serve the 6 New England states, New York and New Jersey, and we have 23 offices. I'm based in our Enfield, Connecticut office, but we also, as you mentioned, we have an office in Dayville, Connecticut. We have a staff of almost 600 at this point, and our core business is lending money to farming, fishing, and forestry, but we also do a number of financial services as well, things like payroll, tax prep, consulting, etc. And this, I got ahead of myself there. That's our business services slide. Farm Start is one of our beginning farmer programs. It's for farmers who might not meet traditional lending criteria. It provides operating capital, things like, you could get a mortgage for real estate, but that gets you soil. Now you're going to need inputs, maybe hire some help, buy some equipment, put up a fence, whatever. And that stuff is often very difficult to collateralize. So this doesn't require any collateral or down payment. And starter farmers have up to 5 years to repay it or roll it into conventional financing. So moving on to marketing, my subtitle is Help, What Do I Do With This Stuff? Most people get into farming and agriculture because they love X. They love bison, they love crops, plants, animals, whatever else, and then they produce it, and then they hope that there's a market for it. So we want to get away from that mindset and think of marketing as your first step before you even produce or grow anything. Think about what is the market that I'm here to serve, and then work backwards to the products that you're going to make. So begin with the end in mind and make marketing your first step. So a marketing plan includes a marketing strategy, descriptions of your products or services, who your ideal customer is, what are your competitors, and think about that in a very broad sense, not just necessarily like in your example, other bison producers, but other protein options that consumers have, other retail channels that they might buy from. Usually your competition, if you will, is much broader than what you think of it as. It's where customers are spending that disposable income that they have. Think about setting your prices as part of your marketing plan, advertising and promotion, how people are going to find out about what you offer, your budget and your measurement, and then forecasting your sales and margin. So some basic assumptions are that farm businesses have constraints. Everyone has constraints. The customer must be your focus. Every farm business is different, and marketing is a very inexact science in that there's no single approach and not everything works. And sometimes it's hard to even tell what works and what doesn't, because it usually requires multiple touch points for a consumer to come to the decision to actually buy your product or service. And which one of those was the tipping point is often really difficult to read in your mind or determine, because the consumer might have seen an email from you, they might have seen a flyer, they might have driven by your place, see you at a farmer's market or whatever else, and usually it takes multiple touch points or multiple exposures to what you're offering before the consumer kind of takes that leap and makes a purchase with you. So why is marketing important? Well, ultimately success depends really on your ability to market and convert prospects to customers, and finding those customers who really value your product or service, and then retaining those most profitable customers. So, as I mentioned at the very beginning, Marketing is often kind of a new way of thinking, getting away from that build it and they will come mindset, and think about find a need and fill it, and starting with the end in mind. You want to think about what the consumer needs or wants, what they value, and then in particular, what products or features earn a premium price or create a premium in the mind of that customer. Why is someone really buying that bison? Is it because it was the cheapest meat they could get? Probably not. It's probably because there's some attribute to it that is of value to that customer that's going to drive that purchase decision. And sometimes you work backwards from the consumer's need to the production system. My background is in the greenhouse business, so I often go back in my examples to that. And for example, one of the things that we did was mixed planters and mixed hanging baskets. And we would often, we started off by doing this by just creating what we thought was, a dynamite looking planter or hanging basket, and then adding up all the inputs, putting a margin on it, and then putting a price on it and putting it up for sale. And one of the things that we realized was that there were certain price points that were hotter than others. Certain price points were more successful than others, and we kind of realized that we hit resistance at certain levels. So we found that anything under about $25 sold really, really well. Once we passed that point, the sales dropped off a lot. So we still offered things above that price point for like that premium buyer or someone that wanted a bigger option. But really, we found out that most of the action was in that $19 to $24.99 range. So we would start with that price and then work backwards and figure out, okay, what is our budget for what can we include in this planter? How much do we have to spend on our seedling plugs and that sort of thing, and then design a product that could meet that price point rather than do it the other way of like coming up with the planter and then figuring out, okay, what do we need to charge for this? So to get deeper into the 5 Ps, product is a product that stands out. You need to have what they call a unique selling proposition. Ultimately, unless what you're offering is completely new to the market, in which case you have an educational challenge of explaining what the heck you're offering. In most cases, when you're offering something, the consumer is already getting that need met elsewhere. So you need to not just convince them that your product is worth buying, but that it's worth changing their buying behavior from what they used to buy from you instead. So you typically have to be one of these 3 things: better, cheaper, or different. Because the consumer's already, I don't have a meat problem. I'm already getting meat. I'm eating it every day. What's going to pull me away from where I'm buying it to buying it from you? And it could be that it's better in some meaningful way. Could be that it's, not in your case, but in some retail cases or whatever else, they market themselves as a cheaper alternative to the competition. Or different in some meaningful way. Maybe the experience is different. Maybe I go to the farm and get it, and I have a relationship with the farmer as opposed to just going to a store. If you're not one of those 3 things, then you're basically a commodity. You're the same as, you're not differentiating yourself in any meaningful way. And commodities are basically price takers, not price makers. You're kind of left to live on what the market price is. So if you're in some aspects of farming, if you're, say, a dairy farmer, and the cooperative picks up your milk every day in the truck and then stops at 3 other dairy farms and then goes to the plant, you're a price taker. You just take whatever the commodity price of milk is for that month, and that's it. But if you can offer some at least partially unique attribute to your product, you have some of what they call pricing power, meaning you can set your price to some degree. Now, there's limitations on that. The price has to be competitive with other options, reasonable, it has to fit the consumer's budget, and the consumer ultimately determines the price because they walk away if it's too high. But sometimes you can start, and as I mentioned with my hang basket example, sometimes you can start with a price and work backwards. Place, where, when, and how your product is sold. And this is where a lot of this has to do with experience, the customer experience, I mean. So it could be, that your product is sold in mainstream supermarkets. It could be that it's sold at farmers markets. It could be sold directly on the farm. It could be sold at certain seasonal types um, of aspects. A big thing with place is, um, think of like a bottle of water. I could buy that bottle of water at Walmart probably for like a quarter, or I could pay $7 for it at Coachella and be lucky to get it. And the difference is not that the bottle of water is any different. The difference is the placement, where you're selling it. So, at a farmer's market, you might have a certain experience premium that you're getting there compared to another outlet. The placement of where you're selling matters a lot. Promotion, how the buyer knows you exist. Advertising is typically what we think of when we think of promotion, but it's not the end. It's everything that goes into the product that you're selling or service. It's the packaging, the merchandising, the sales display, the in-person contact and relationships. And I put this in because sometimes when I speak to farmer audiences, sometimes I speak to commodity producers and say, well, I don't have to promote my product because it goes to the co-op and they market it for me. Well, the co-op's doing that function for you, so it still matters. You still ultimately should take an active role in promoting your product, even if you're selling number 2 yellow corn to an elevator. Your product and packaging, think about what's realistic to produce, and the packaging can kind of in some ways determine the market that you're selling for, whether you're selling in a retail package or in a mayonnaise in a 5-gallon tub, which just goes to a completely different market, like the food service market. For meat products, it might be specific cuts, trim, or weight. If you're selling, a side of bison, that's going to be a whole different buyer tip usually than someone that's buying a specific cut. Maybe your product is produced or raised in certain ways. Tell the story of that and offer packaging that suits your customer and options that are going to be convenient for them. The easier you make it for someone to buy from you, the better off you're going to do. Price, this is a big one, and ultimately often determines the overall profitability of your farm. Think about what the customer is currently paying for the other options of your product category. Think about, can you justify a premium, or alternatively, can you produce it in a cheaper way to get more margin? Can you make a profit with the price that the market's going to bear? Or do you need to figure out, adjust your marketing or adjust your product to give yourself a margin that you can live on? Crop budgets and pricing is a simple equation, but easy to forget. Gross income minus all your expenses equals your profit or loss. How much you gross isn't always the most important factor. You got to consider all those inputs that go into your product, and everything's going to be paid by your selling price. And a big thing in agriculture that can kill a lot of businesses is, as in any perishable industry, is what they call shrink. So what's shrink? It's any product that you make or produce or buy for resale that you can't sell because of any number of factors, such as spoilage, date expiration. In the greenhouse business that I come from, we grew poinsettias for Christmas every year. I could grow the best poinsettias around, price them right, be efficient in my production, all that. But if on December 24th I have a greenhouse half full of poinsettias, I probably did it all for nothing at best. So shrink will kill you every time. Yeah.
The other people have a hard time defining their own labor cost.
Yes.
Right? They don't keep.
You got to value your own time.
And how much time they're putting into different aspects of the.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to farmers markets, I love farmers markets. I like to go to them as a consumer. We dabbled in doing it in the greenhouse business when I was in that business. I like farmers markets, but if you wanted to come up with the most inefficient way to distribute goods and services, it's probably the farmers market. You go there, you sit out there for 4 hours in the hot sun and hope the customer walks by your table and buys something from you. I guess the takeaway from all this is that it's okay to sell out. You don't want to sell out first thing in the morning and then have a lot of lost sales. But if you sell, you could sell everything great until, half an hour before closing. But if you have a lot of product that you can't resell after that market, that shrink is going to cost you. And a lot of farmers don't factor that in, as well as the cost of yourself sitting out in the hot sun and or in the cold wind, whatever, at the market. Having said that, I got a picture of a farmer's market. Take the product to the consumer. Think about where and when and how they want to buy your product. And think about that experience that the customer gets and the story behind what you're offering. Distribution channels. A channel is a method of getting product from the producer to the consumer. And basically the bottom line is that the further from the consumer, the less money you usually get. Wholesale channels can move large volumes at low prices. Direct marketing moves less, but often at a higher price. You're basically buying margin with your own labor and time. So branding. When we think about branding, we think of well-known international brands. And branding, in my opinion on marketing, is one of the keys to getting a premium price. And I'm going to tie this back to the farm level in a minute, but for now, let's just consider some of the big national brands that we have out there and think about the value that these add to the products they're selling. Like, the Nike sneaker out there, it's probably better than the Walmart store brand sneaker, but is it 10 times better? Probably not. It's a big part of that pricing that they're getting is the brand value that they're adding, that they're marketing to it. So as an example, my wife showed me this the other day and wanted to buy this Prada bag with tie-dye print, this hideous item. And I'm thinking, okay, happy wife, happy life. Sure, honey, do it for baby. If this will make you happy, why not? And she's like, and I'm like, oh, by the way, how much does this cost? She's like, $2,550. Well, again, probably a well-made bag, hopefully, but you could probably get something equally well-made for a tenth, if that, of the price. It's getting that's an extreme value of brand value an extreme example of brand value that's added. This is getting 90% more money because it's got that logo on the side. So successful brands they're telling a story. In the case of the Prada bag, it's telling a story of exclusivity, luxury. It's made in Italy by handmade artisans, whatever it might be. It's Kim Kardashian owns one. I don't know what it is, but it's telling a story. Think about what your story is, the story of your own farm. And it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be a multinational, international luxury brand. You need to think about, your own name, your own identity, your own story. What makes your product special and different from the number of other options that the consumer has. So you want to think about your pitch. Be sure to offer the customer something that they value. If what you think is great about your product might be different than what the consumer values. It might be that the consumer really values the going to the farm and that interpersonal interaction with the farmer, as opposed to, you might think that bison is great because it's high protein and low fat and whatever, and the consumer might not even know about that. They might value the experience more than anything. So you need to think about, how is your story compelling to that customer? How does it speak to that customer? And develop that story that appeals to your customer and what they value. And another thing is, promotions work best when building on existing demand and focus on your best customers. And we learned this the hard way in the nursery, garden center, greenhouse business, in that one of the things that always drove us nuts was that we did about 60% of our business for the year in like 8 weeks every year, basically from mid-April through May into mid-June. And then the rest, and for those 8 weeks, we were always constantly croaking over capacity. We just never had enough staff, never had enough registers, never had enough parking spots in the parking lot. It was just, we were always overwhelmed. And then the whole rest of the year, we had excess capacity. And so we tried and tried to come up with promotions that would like fill the parking lot in July, and get people in the garden, whatever else. And well, we didn't even learn that quickly. It took us a long time to learn it. But we learned that those promotion dollars were way more effective if we spent them on Memorial Day than if we spent them in July, because we were pushing a stone downhill. We were marketing when the demand was already high. We were speaking to customers when they were already thinking about gardening and plants and being outside and spring and everything else, as opposed to July, where we had to convince them that instead of going to the beach, you should go out and work in your yard. And, it was just a much harder sell. And then the other thing too was focus on retaining your best customers as opposed to getting a new person in the door. So get your message in front of your target customer. Think about personal selling. Don't give up. Your first impression is probably not going to work. How am I doing on time? What do I get left?
You got 9 minutes.
Okay, we'll pick it up a little bit. But advertising can be free. One of the things that our marketing department at Farm Credit East works on is what we call earned media, as opposed to paid media. So like paid media is your advertising. You pay to put an ad in the newspaper. Earned media is when you get an article printed in the editorial section of the newspaper. And that is usually free. It takes your time to produce the content, but it's often way more effective than the paid ad is. So we'll do things like we'll put out content on like farm business management, financial management, marketing, other things like that. You have to be providing value to the publication and to the reader. They're not going to just put an infomercial on their pages, but we'll put out real content, and then and by the way, it's from so and so at Farm Credit East, and maybe we get a byline at the bottom or whatever else. And it's not a hard sell opportunity, but hopefully they read that and consider, and then the next time they want something that we offer, they may think of our name at that point. How this can work with like a garden center is in the spring, get a picture of your kids with some flowers and digging in the dirt or something like that and send that to your paper. They love that kind of stuff. I've learned that newspaper content producers you could argue that they're understaffed, or you could argue that they're lazy, or both, but really they're usually really looking for content that they can publish. And if you can, with press releases and content providing, get your name in there in media, it can be really useful. People, you got to have a person that's going to value your product. The hair dryer with the bald guy is obviously a mismatch. You could market all day long to that guy. He's never going to buy that product. You want to market to the person that is valuing your product. People have a need and desire for your product, and it could be any number of demographic attributes that you're targeting, but you want to think about who is your best customer. Just demographics, the science of putting people into categories by interest and by background. And then this is just a website that I thought was really well done, that was done on the cheap. It's a farm in Connecticut that sells lamb and wool. I think they probably paid someone to do this for them, but they didn't invest thousands of dollars in their website. They just had one done, but it's got nice pictures. It tells the story. It talks about the farm. Meet Pete. It talks about the farmer, what he's doing, why you should buy all this stuff from him as opposed to someone else. It's got features their products. It shows that you don't need to spend $1 million to do this stuff.
One thing I've also learned about websites is what is your ability to keep it updated, right?
Yes.
Think about how often you're able to update it versus what you're putting on it. You don't want a website with all the information.
Be realistic. Yeah. If you can't or are unwilling or just too busy to keep like a seasonal content part of it up to date, don't even do it. Because the worst thing is when a customer goes to your website and, at this time of year, I still have a thing about my poinsettias. Like the ship has sailed on that. It's time to you gotta keep it fresh. Or if you're, like I said, unwilling or unable to do that. If you don't have the resource to do that, that's not ideal, but it's okay. But just don't put things on there that are going to age. Make sure that it's evergreen, that it's telling your story in a way that's not seasonal. So just to review, the 5 P's of marketing: your product, your pricing, place of delivery, promotion, and the people that are buying it. And that's me in the greenhouse at 5. That was my first job. I was checking for bugs. So, any questions or discussion? I think we got a couple of minutes left. Hope this was at least somewhat interesting. So, thank you for your time.